Blizzard has announced the first teams for their Overwatch League, which is due to start in Q3, according to the original announcement. Overall, there are 7 teams. We have 5 from the USA and 2 representing Asia. Obviously, they're stressing the geolocation element, that you actually are tied to a city and a region, as well as just being a team within the league. The teams themselves, the Los Angeles franchise goes to Noah Whinston of Immortals. The Boston franchise goes to Robert Kraft, who is part of the ownership group of the Patriots, New England Patriots. New York goes to Jeff Wilpon, who is the son of the principal owner of the Mets and himself is a head person within the Nets, the Mets, the baseball team. Miami goes to Ben Spoot, who's the Misfits owner. San Francisco goes to Andy Miller of NRG. And Shanghai, they're talking about the 2 Asian teams now. Shanghai goes to NetEase, who is actually the Overwatch distributor within China. And Seoul, Korea, goes to Kevin Chu, who is a co-founder of Kabam and is a head person within something called KSV Esports. So first and foremost, let's analyze the locations and what regions are being represented within the league so far at this point with the first 7 teams. So first and foremost, if you've noticed, if you've seen any of my content regarding Overwatch, whether it's videos or whether it's the Overwatch League discussions that we've had franchising within Esports Salon, you'll know that I'm pretty, and obviously, and I've got oversight with MonteCristo, I'm pretty skeptical about the benefits of geolocation. I think that's something from traditional sports that I don't necessarily see crossing over in the same way into esports, and it has certainly been far from proven that it works in any area, even in Korean esports, which is very built up and has had a long tenure of having regular events that people attend, etc. They don't go by city or go by region, etc. So in spite of that, this is the approach, the model that Blizzard is taking with this, where you're tied to a city, and thus, in theory, you want prime cities if that model is going to work, like LA, like New York, like Shanghai. These are areas like Seoul that you really want to have as a location. So first and foremost, when you come to that topic, I'm already confused by the fact that the Misfits owner isn't just representing Miami, he's actually representing Miami, Orlando. That's the way it was listed within the announcement video. It didn't just say Miami, despite the fact his backing originally comes from the Miami Heat. So he's now representing 2 cities simultaneously within Florida. It's not he's got Miami and therefore everyone from Florida supports this one team. He's got Miami and he's got Orlando. So even in the traditional sports theme, he's kind of trying to pair 2 cities together. I don't understand what the premise that they're going for in this particular sense is. Because if he just had Miami, well, there's no other franchise within Florida anyway. So presumably people from Orlando would support the team as it is. Like, what is the logic behind putting the 2 cities there in that particular sense? Whereas, for example, when you have the LA franchise, you don't get LA, San Diego. You know, you don't do it that particular way and try and get those 2 aspects, even though it would make more sense to have LA, San Diego, right? Because you've got San Francisco also exists within your state. And people are going to be looking at that like, oh, which way are all the California fans going to go if they're not literally from San Francisco or LA? So I wonder what the direction there is. That actually seems like a very puzzling element, especially if you're going for a geolocation element. And obviously, historically, especially within basketball, Heat and Magic fans, so Miami and Orlando, they're rivals, aren't they? They're the team in theory that you hate the most. Just like, obviously, Philly and Pittsburgh hate each other, you know. It doesn't make that much sense to unite them in an explicit way, naming both the cities. It's one thing if you do one and then the other one doesn't have a game within that franchise, within that sport rather, and therefore you just support that team. Like, for example, someone from San Jose might support the Lakers or might support the Golden State Warriors because they don't have their own team in basketball. This is a bizarre element. Then, talking about the USA, it might seem bizarre initially, right? Okay, there's 7 teams announced, and 5 of them are from the USA. Not even North America, just the USA alone. Like, okay, understandable. There is a lot of money in the USA. There are a lot of investors from the USA who want a team and want it to be tied to the USA. I can get that element of it. But one problem with the way that this has been done is the cities themselves seem almost arbitrary. Like, yes, people might have fought over whether they get Los Angeles and New York. But beyond that, everything else is seemingly up for grabs. Like, presumably, the reason why you take Boston, if you're the Kraft guy, is just because New England, right? Presumably, the reason why you take Miami, Orlando, if you're Ben Spoot, is, well, okay, Miami Heat's, people are backing me, I want that area. But that's part of the problem, isn't it? Some of these areas don't have any logical reason to pick them. Like, it's not like they are the biggest sports towns, because think of some of the sports towns that we've seen left off here. There's no Chicago. Basically, there's almost nothing in the middle of America. There's no Chicago, obviously a legendary area for most sports, all the big sports in America. No Las Vegas, yes, not a big sports town, but they constantly have been stories over the last 10, 15 years about Las Vegas wants sports franchises, because obviously the betting there's a massive thing. Esports betting just opened up supposedly within Las Vegas. So this would be a prime area to have a franchise and to build something new, especially with no traditional sports to compete with you. Nothing there whatsoever. No Philadelphia, nothing in the entire state of Texas. Think about the state of Texas, how big it is, the fact that within the USA, it is kind of its own little area. It's got this massive, rich tradition within American culture, no representation whatsoever. So all that money and business money and oil money in Texas, no one was interested in esports. No one wants to get in on the ground floor. Now, you might say to me, yeah, but more franchises haven't been announced yet. We don't know where it's going yet. Yes, all we know right now is what's here as it is. So we have to examine and analyze this. You can't take it for granted in your head. Oh, I'm sure Blizzard will get more teams within Korea. Oh, I'm sure they'll have 4 or 5 in Europe, and yet they'll have a few more in USA. You don't know that. They have 7 teams right now. They're in a rush to get this league put forwards because it starts in Q3 according to their plan if it doesn't get delayed. So they have to get on with it. And this presumably means these other people, if those deals are going on, are not finalized. Some of those may not happen. We saw the story Richard published where some people were backing out. Some people were overly skeptical. Some sponsors didn't want to necessarily be involved. So you can't take anything for granted right now. You just got to look at what we've got right now. This is what they've secured so far in OverWatch League. And this is all they can be guaranteed of. We'll see what happens beyond that. So that's a big problem for me, that there's no teams within those areas. If it's going to be so important to have geolocation and promote it in that sense. Because, for example, yeah, you could say that if you just had a USA franchise, say there was just New York, just like you've got just Shanghai in China at the moment. Okay, yeah, I could get it if all the Chinese fans follow the Chinese team, assuming they get Chinese players, and they compete internationally, and they're like, I want to see China succeed. Okay, in the same sense, I could get it if the USA all follow New York. But how's it going to work if you've got all these franchises spread out in the USA, and you're dividing up the viewer group? Like, is someone in Chicago gonna go and support the New York franchise? How do you even appeal to him over the guy from San Francisco? Like, what is the fact it's slightly closer on the map going to make the person choose New York, or is he going to choose Boston, which is below? I mean, it doesn't, there's not really any logical aspect as to how the geolocation is going to work for the other fans. Plus, I have to say, that's one respect in which I found it a bit tacky in when they originally advertised the Overwatch League, that they said, your cities, your thing. Like, mate, there's not many people's cities on there. I mean, I come from Europe. It's a fairly big continent, It's something that's fairly important within the world in business and sports and esports particularly. Yeah, we're not represented at all at the moment. There's no cities, actually, which is something we want to move on to. But let's stay within North America for a moment. So here's another aspect. So not only are there 5 just within the USA, there are 2 franchises, 2 totally separate franchises, just in California alone. That's representing that alone as it is. So again, interesting in terms of geolocation. And then it is just USA, no North America. There's no Canada in there. You don't have Toronto. You don't have Montreal. You don't have Vancouver's obviously a classic town for hockey. Used to have basketball with the Grizzlies back in the day. Now, then you go over to Asia. Asia is an incredibly important market. It has massive potential for viewer base in the other games, massive amounts of money, and always produce the best players when their scenes are very vibrant there. And at the moment, as far as we can tell, Korea, they're definitely a lot of players of Overwatch, and in China, presumably quite a lot as well. So you've got to look at it and say, first of all, China has 1 slot alone. China has some of the most money in all of esports as it stands right now. Yes, admittedly, as these big investors come in, like some of the people getting involved here, that might not be the case anymore. And certainly NA parallels or maybe supersedes it. But right now, in the history of esports over the last 5-6 years, China has had some of the most money with all those billionaires, sons of billionaires, big companies, and obviously a massive streaming scene and a number of players and people going and attending matches, etc. They have a massive esports scene, very, very rich. And so it is important to get as many of those people involved as you can if you want the league to blow up immediately. It's also an extremely important region for viewership. When League of Legends boasts about its massive numbers for the World Championship, realize millions and millions of those people come from China. And without China, League of Legends doesn't get that ridiculous number that it has over all the other games. Instead, without China, League of Legends, if it was only Western League of Legends, that would be absolutely paralleled, if not sometimes overtaken by CSGO, which obviously is only in the West, North America and Europe. There's not really any viewership massively from Asia, etc. over there. So China, very important to get on board. And so far, they've gotten one franchise on board, and it's nothing to do with any of the big Chinese money. Then you've got to consider Korea. Obviously, Korea is vital to have on board. Not just one franchise, in my opinion. You've got to have many, because that's where most of the good players come from. That's where most of the top teams, as they stand right now, come from. And it's key to have franchises there, in theory, to ensure more's there and to represent the Chinese fans, because again, the Korean fans, because in Korea, again, viewership can be massive from Korea. They have a lot of people play the game and they convert a lot of those people to watching the game. So already, yeah, they've got OG and Apex, they've laid the groundwork, they've got some of the best teams in the world, arguably the best team in the world. Now you're in a position where you've got to get those viewers on board. So to me, you probably need more than one Korean franchise. I mean, I realize people will say, yeah, but some of the other franchises will get Korean players. We have no clue yet whether the other franchises will get a whole Korean team and therefore be supported, or they'll have like one or two players, right? Do Korean fans care to watch one or two players? Do Korean fans watch LCS to watch Ryu play in Phoenix 1? I don't really know that they do on the same kind of numbers as they would if it was an entire Korean team, and certainly not as much as if it was a Korean team in Korea or based from Korea in that sense, not just somebody who's gone out as a mercenary and played for a foreign team. So again, Korea, so far not that much established, just like China, and yet it's very important to get them involved. Obviously also, Korea, long history of big sponsors getting directly involved in owning teams. None of those teams involved right now. Finally, what's the region that we've left out? I already hinted at it before. It's Europe, right? It's my home region. So Europe has zero representation right now. Now, bearing in mind, Europe and North America, in theory, should have been some of the first people out of the door, because that's where the majority currently of Western fans obviously want to watch tournaments and live right now and are based and all the rest of it. So the idea that they haven't been talking to anyone from Europe and no one's interested and they haven't managed to sign any deals, what's going on there? Because presumably there were teams in discussions from the beginning of this thing from Europe, but not a single investment group or owner has signed a deal and officially signed up to the league as yet. That's a problem for me. That suggests to me that there's something going on in Europe. I know the European esports scene in an Overwatch doesn't have necessarily massive money, and League of Legends famously doesn't have as much as NA, but in CSGO, there's massive amounts of money. There's people like Virtus.pro get play, and North getting paid like $20,000, $25,000 a month each salary. You've got millions of dollars in prize money being given out in European tournaments in CSGO. Where's this Overwatch support? Does Europe not believe in the model that they're using of franchising an Overwatch League? Obviously, European sports don't have franchising in terms of the big ones in the same ways you have in traditional North American sports. So maybe the businessmen in North America believe in that model and that concept, and it fits their philosophy of how a sport should run. Whereas Europe, it's more about relegation in these aspects and battling each other and not having caps and being able to do, to some degree, whatever you want. And not the same sort of oversight that you have over in the North American sports. So it's just no one have the money in Europe? Does no one care to be involved? There are massive ownership groups in Europe. Think about some people like G2, like Virtus.pro and ES Force behind them. Think about the Refresh Entertainment people who own Astralis and Heroic and Godsent. Where are all these people involved in going here? What about SK Gaming? They've got some of the biggest teams, got a very long history in esports. Fnatic, okay, don't necessarily have the same level of investment, although they did take some on recently, but obviously a massive rich tradition in pretty much every big esports game for the last 5 to 10 years. Where are all these orgs? Why are none of them in on the ground floor as we go forwards in this project? That's something you really got to ask yourself questions about ultimately. Then you've got to ask yourself, for Europe, are there issues with business there? Does that mean that just people don't have the interest to invest if they do? Or is there just not the money? Now, in terms of the geolocation element, again, if you're going to push that aspect, then in some sense, aren't you pushing back against the notion that people who aren't from those regions will support as vociferously? I mean, isn't this an issue that if you have all these locations in North America and you have Europe and that, yeah, people will watch because it's a great game. That's my model as to how people watch their game. But if you think geolocation is so important, you better have multiple European franchises. You better have a really good, strong base there for all those European fans and all those European players to get involved and want to watch the league and be a part of it. This is a massive element that will go against you if there's no European element to the geolocation. Also, remember, the most classic rivalry in esports ever since we got to the global level, you go right back to X3 versus NIP in CS 1.6, it wasn't 1.6 at the time, but it was 1.3, but CS 1.6 in 2001, X3 versus NIP, NA versus EU. You look at people like Cooler versus 04 and Quake. You look at Rafa versus Cypher and Quake Live. It's Europe versus NA. That is the big rivalry for Westerners because those are our two big regions in the West. If you don't have that and you can't make it healthy, it's not going to mean as much. Like, what if Europe has 1 or 2 slots in the end? And then NA has 5, if not more in the future, because they got a lot of investment people who want to get on board there. What, we're going to have 2 spots versus 5, and that's going to be a rivalry. It's not going to feel like a rivalry in the same sense, is it? Not going to create the same narratives that presumably, if you buy into the geolocation element, you surely buy into the concept of narratives and promoting almost a level of, hopefully, a not malicious tribalism within people and inspiring that aspect of loyalty. Particularly brand loyalty, obviously. So now let's talk about the teams and organizations and owners that are involved with this, not just where they're located. So first of all, let's go here. Los Angeles, one of the most coveted spots, is Noah Whinston. It's the Immortals. Now, we know they have good backing because they've repeatedly taken in investment from pretty impressive people. They've obviously got the backing of the Grizzlies owner from the NBA. They've got Lionsgate, that film company, involved with them. Noah Whinston in general has shown himself to be a pretty savvy businessman, considering he only came into the space a couple of years ago. He's proven to be very good at raising money, at getting investment. I mean, compared to some of the other people who did it and then have nothing to show for it and haven't really built their brand up or outright just failed in the games, he has to some degree, in terms of the first wave of people getting in that heavy investment, been something of a wonderkind in that particular sense. He has been able to get a lot of big and important people from outside of esports involved, get their money into the game, integrated into a real team that's actually had some degree of success. Not massive amounts of success, but of the teams that have taken on this massive sponsorship, pretty good success overall, but at least promising, and definitely has at least got a team going forwards where some of the other ones have really been in trouble and kind of had to hopefully bounce back. Now, interestingly enough, when you consider it's not just about who owns the team and the fact that they're from LA, that doesn't mean the players are going to be from LA or even from NA. You look right now, a lot of the best teams, remember, this is one of the most bizarre elements, is the best teams are in Korea, but then outside of Korea, the best teams and the ones that can compete with Korea are teams from Europe. Well, Europe has no slots right now. And NA, presumably, if they want the best team to go along with their slot, is going to take European players or European teams or Korean players, Korean teams. So interestingly enough, when you look at it like LA, you might say, right, if you've got one of the best spots and you've got some of the most money, just sign the best Korean team. Get Lunatic High if you can. But actually, if you look at the way Noah Winston has spoken in interviews, and at least on his Twitter, and his personal philosophy on it, yes, in theory, he wants to win and have the best team and try and promote that. But if possible, go back and watch this Esports Salon episode we did. He is heavily invested into the idea that you have to have marketable players who are relatable for fans. And since he's got an LA slot, a Western slot, in theory, his philosophy would go along with the line that he should try and get a European, a Western team. Now, one of the best ones, yes, if he can. And he might have some Korean players in the mix there. Obviously, we have like Effect on Envious already. But I don't think actually that the suggestion is that he will just go and have a bidding war for the best Korean team necessarily, because if it's possible that this league's going to be about geolocation and marketing as much as about just league success, he's going to try and balance success by having a good team, but try and make it as marketable as possible from day one and really emphasize his franchise, especially if he's had to pay a lot of money, perhaps the most money, to have the LA franchise, one of the most important franchises of all. Because if you're just going to go on the best Korean team and just win the league, fuck it, mate. Just go and get like Miami or Boston. One of the slots are actually, no one necessarily is fighting for that specific geolocation. They want the slot and then maybe they got to pick the city they had. That's something I want people to think about when they think about Immortals in LA and what they might do in terms of the team they might get. So let's move to one of those teams I just mentioned, Boston. So obviously, Kraft coming in with the history of the Patriots, etc. Okay, there's a logic behind that. We understand that. Success in sports is obviously massively there. Now, I would say some of that success in sports with the Patriots comes from having Bill Belichick and then having amazing scouting to be able to get Tom Brady. Yeah, that's all great. And obviously the whole Bledsoe scenario that even allowed him to play in the first place, which obviously isn't directly tied to the Kraft people. But with that said, they've done a pretty good job in terms of drafting in those games as well. Like, you'd think they've got the sports world down. But here's the problem. Who's the partner within esports? Who are the people within esports representing this historic, decorated sports franchise in the esports world? That's what we don't know right now, right? We don't know anything about that. Robert Kraft doesn't even have a Twitter account. Does he understand the internet? Presumably he's not going to be running this. He's not going to be directly involved in day-to-day stuff. It's just him and the group that are buying it, and they're going to delegate the responsibility to other people. So do those people understand how to build up a brand around this? Do they have history in esports? Do they know how to manage a team? Do they know how to put a team together? Do they know what coaches to hire? These are problems that some of the best esports brands in the world still have and suffer from when talent goes and when people retire and they move into a new game. How are these guys going to figure it out? They might have money and the know-it-all and the knowledge of how to run a sports franchise and how to get sponsors within Boston, but do they know these aspects of the esports world? There's no signs right now to suggest they do. So that's a big investment for them and a big gamble. Similar scenario in New York. You go over to New York, we've got Jeff Wilpon there. So son of the principal owner of the Mets, a head person within the Mets himself. I think it was COO was his title, right? Now, first and foremost, baseball as a sport, as a traditional sport, is about as far as you could get from esports. It's all about traditional elements. It's a very long game. For people who don't follow it closely, it's a pretty boring game. Admittedly, it is very heavily tied to geolocation, so maybe that can help these guys. But there's no real crossover for me between those sports and esports, especially because with the whole Moneyball phenomenon, their notion there that it's such a stats-based sport in baseball and about scouting people, we haven't really got that in not just esports, but especially Overwatch, which doesn't even have the stats. So I don't know where they're going to get their strengths from initially for a sport. Like, yes, they've got a great location if that ends up bearing out that the geolocation thing's big for you, but they probably spent a lot of money for that, and they really need to get cooking with gas and get working here. So great location, but how will they leverage it? Again, what people from esports are they involved with here? Who's going to help them? Because remember, they're not going to even be able to really tell the person they hire that much about what they do and micromanage because they don't know themselves. They're going to have to hire someone and trust that that goes well. And as we've seen with some of those franchises and orgs in League of Legends, such as NRG, sometimes you hire someone you thought was good, or Echo Fox, and they're a clown and they don't know what they're doing. And guess what? They didn't even have the background in esports that they convinced you they did have, but you didn't talk to a consultant because you don't have any access to the scene. So I see New York as being another one, along with Boston, which has potentially got a lot of shaky ground, and they really have to build a foundation before they can do anything. Never mind all the rest of it. LA comes in with a franchise with Immortals and Noah Winston. Now, Miami, first of all, while they do have a basis in esports, that's like a year old. You know, Misfits, this is not an org that's been around a long time, especially not with this ownership group. They have the backing of the Miami Heat. Okay, great. Yep. They've also got the correct location for that. So they share something with the Mets and with the Patriots guys in Boston and New York in that sense. Problem is, this is a pretty new owner, and there's already been a couple of times where it's gone a bit dodgy. First of all, he's got an EULCS slot. He doesn't have a NALCS slot. He hasn't gone out big in LCS. So this is his first huge investment on the same level. Then, the game that in theory Misfits is the most successful in is probably still Overwatch. They had that fantastic team earlier last year. So let's say like middle to latter part of last year, the Swedish-French one. Now, the problem is they're no longer Swedish-French, are they? Because they did a breakup and they had a big roster shuffle and they got all the Swedish players in their team and let the French players go to what is now Rogue. Now, I have to say that on the surface looked like it had a logic to it and they were getting good players. But if you actually look at the roles of who played what role within the team and who the star players of the team, I actually feel like that was a big misstep. Like, they should have just looked towards Overwatch League, not the short term, and said, no, let's not do this just for nationality. Let's just keep the best players in our team. And even if they aren't players we're going to use, these are pieces that can be traded and used later. I think letting that swap occur shows that, again, he's delegated some kind of responsibility. In this case, maybe to the players themselves, as though they're now going to do things. I don't know that if you go and ask like the Kraft guy and the guy from the Mets, oh, will you be letting the players decide everything about how the teams run? I don't think they're going to. That's not the way traditional sports franchises run in America. So that in itself, a little bit alarming when you consider you go into a massive league with huge investment that almost has to work. Otherwise, it's going to be in big trouble in a few years. So, okay, you've got kind of a mix of esports, fairly new in esports, and then a little bit of aspects of, got some traditional sports links there at least. Okay, I'd put that on the middle ground in terms of someone becoming in the league. Similarly, we've got Andy Miller, we've got San Francisco, and this is the NRG group, isn't it? So first of all, backing minority, I stress minority shareholder for the Sacramento Kings. People always say it like, oh, backed by the Sacramento Kings. Not quite. That's like that whole thing where people in the NBA never shut the fuck up about how Jay-Z owns the Nets. Definitely doesn't. Owns an incredibly small amount of the Nets, and as such doesn't run the Nets and can't single-handedly convince fucking LeBron to go there. People are so stupid on some of these narratives they like to spin out like it was the WWE or something. So, in this scenario, one of the problems with saying, well, we've got NRG on side. They've been involved in esports a lot. They've been involved in Overwatch. They've been involved in CSGO. They've been involved in League of Legends. Yes, they have. Have they had any success in these games? Have they fuck? One of the things about NRG is they are one of the orgs who have spent among the most money on all their teams and gotten, in relative proportional terms for how much they have spent, so little back in terms of actual success in the games. I would say, relative to how much they've invested and opportunities they've had, they have been terrible in esports so far. And Overwatch is no exception. As you can see by my video about Seagull and the way that they treated one of their star players, let him run the team in many respects. I don't care, by the way, if people come out and lie who are involved in that story and say, this is not true. It's irrelevant. I have my sources. I backed them up. After that case, many more people came out privately, obviously, and corroborated even further. We're talking about triple, quadruple checked all the facts. I'm willing to stand by that. So they have been a terrible org so far. So that's a worse scenario than even any of the other people who've been involved in esports. I'd say in terms of the esports people coming into Overwatch League, they get the lowest mark in terms of competency within esports thus far. And therefore the notion that that's going to translate over to potential as it is at the moment. Now I will say as a caveat, some of those mistakes were made with the past owners and the past people involved in it before, not necessarily Andy Miller directly and as one of the main ownership people. So I will put that as a caveat, but some of them have been under that group. So I think, again, that's another group of people where it's not so much that they've got the great esports tenure. They've been in esports, but I think they've made mistakes there. And again, their problem has been trusting the wrong people, delegating to the wrong people, hiring the wrong people, and therefore ending up with the wrong teams and mismanaged teams and poorly handled teams. There's also another concept that you have to think about when you think about the USA slots, and not just who is there, but who isn't there, who is absent and who is conspicuous by their absence. So if you were to today sign two teams that exist as they stand right now, who are Western teams to represent Western geolocations, you would want to sign Rogue and Envious, possibly in the other order when you consider the success that Envious is having over in Korea. So these are the teams you want to sign, but neither organization is currently in the Overwatch League. Now, maybe you can give an out and say maybe Rogue could get involved in Europe. I don't know if that's the case, because Rogue as an org have shown no kind of signs right now that they can get that investment money and that they are going to go that route. So forget the Rogue one. Maybe that lineup can end up elsewhere. But the really interesting one is Envious, because Envious is one of the biggest Western esports orgs. They last year had incredible success across many different games. In CSGO, they've won majors. They won massive titles in Call of Duty and other games. They've got the best org, right? They're the best org with the best teams in terms of the Western orgs overall in Overwatch right now. They have the best Overwatch team, arguably. But where are they? I mean, in theory, already we've had 5 slots go in the USA. What, are they not going to get involved? They're not going to take the investment? Then you've got to consider, if they don't, well, their team should be the #1 team that everyone recruits, or their players should be. And that's another thing. You go out there and you ask around the scene, and people immediately start telling me, oh, actually, we don't even know they're a team right now. Actually, maybe they are just going to be individuals and go elsewhere, and it'll just be highest bidder getting players, and we won't even see what arguably is the best Western Overwatch team even play in the Overwatch League. That'll just be gone. So that's a bit conspicuous to me that Envious isn't involved right now. You could make a case and say, well, maybe there'll be a European slot, even though it's an NA owner, because at least in CSGO, for example, he's been heavily invested into European side of esports and hasn't gone the NA route for marketability, etc. But that's certainly a question you got to ask for the USA area. Conspicuous lack of the big LCS teams. Right, we've got Immortals. Okay, they're through the door. Misfits is an EU LCS team, not really what I'm thinking of at the moment. NRG was in LCS, but aren't really known primarily for League of Legends right now. They're more known for their Overwatch team, etc. So where's Cloud9? One of the most successful North American orgs in League of Legends and LCS history, not just in terms of success in the league, but in terms of business success, have absolutely shown that they're a team who know how to be smart in terms of investment, how to run the company as a business, how to make profit, how to build a fan base, already got a lot of fans across different esports games. Where are they? Whereabouts is TSM? Arguably, in terms of fans, maybe still the biggest League of Legends franchise, especially in the West, obviously. They've got millions and millions of fans. Well, that might be an exaggeration, but they've got a lot of fans, put it that way. And they've also been quite successful in business. Cloud9, TSM, Team Liquid, also partnered up with, I mean, Gold State Warriors, I think is Team Liquid, right? They've got lots of money. They've got successful teams in multiple different esports games, CSGO and League of Legends. these three organizations, if they wanted, could get the 20 million, could get the 10 million. They could be in it tomorrow. So actually the fact that they aren't announced early on, while someone like Immortals is, while Misfits is, actually suggests to me that they're not going to be involved in Overwatch League. And this is another aspect, especially for the NA region, for the USA, that I think you have to add in when you have the discussion about Overwatch League, which is that because of what's happened with the NALCS, where next year, for anyone who doesn't know from Overwatch League, the NALCS, League of Legends, their league in North America, the LCS, will be franchised. And their franchise slots are a flat fee, $10 million. And people like Cloud9, TS17, I'm telling you right now, they're going to be involved in it. It's almost certain they're absolutely going to be. They can all get the money. They've all got the pedigree. They've all got every element you'd need to justify being a team in the LCS. So the fact that they're not currently involved in Overwatch League, they're not in the first 7 names, they're not in the 5 from the USA, suggests to me that they weren't the people who were out there like, we got to get in there immediately. We want to bid for this. If they're going to be involved in it, maybe it's later. Maybe they're still negotiating. But the fact that LCS costs less money for some of the slots, the fact that it's a more proven league with more proven viewership, part of the aspect which people couldn't reveal publicly, but I don't have NDAs, is that supposedly Riot's already got a big sponsor involved for lots of money, and that they've shown this business plan to people for the NALCS, and that's why those teams already are like, yes, let's get in on this. I can get the 10 million. I want into this. I want to be franchised. So I feel like that's actually drawn away some of the people that would otherwise maybe have been in Overwatch League and would have floated it and taken a chance, and have had kind of already got teams in Overwatch and tested the space out and were waiting to see what was going to happen. I feel as though those teams maybe have made the choice that they're going to NALCS instead. And it's not that they're going to do both. It's not that we're going to pick between the two. It's that actually they've looked at it and they've said, well, we're already in League of Legends. Now we've used Overwatch League maybe as a bargaining chip to say to Riot, you better come on board and do this franchising thing and get us all involved and get us involved in broadcasting rights and in sponsorship sharing and revenue sharing. And we'll stay in your league where we've already got the established base and it works for all of us, rather than gamble on Overwatch League. So those people also conspicuous by their absence. Now, once we go outside of the USA, we go over to Asia. So we've got Shanghai, and that is NetEase. They are the Overwatch distributor for China, but more than that, they are also the distributor for Blizzard in China. They've run many, many games. Apparently, they've been partnered with Blizzard for something like, I think it was 10 years, 9 to 10 years now. It started in 2008 when they licensed StarCraft 2 and they brought Battle.net to China. But obviously there've been all the other games since then from Blizzard, which are massive games, and obviously especially in net cafes. So China is a huge market, and they've given it to the distributor of Blizzard's games there, and Overwatch particularly. Now, I can immediately see a huge potential conflict of interest with the distributor of the game having a team themselves in the global Overwatch League. Because remember, as you've already seen, there are other tournaments going on right now in China. There are other tournament circuits planned to go on in China, even separate to Overwatch League. So how will they run, and in a fair manner, and not in any way be mistreated or neglected, if the distributor of the game itself has a team in a different league that he wants to succeed and perhaps is in competition and runs parallel with Chinese tournaments of Overwatch? That in itself is a huge conflict of interest. Remember a few years ago when Twitch bought like GGA, and it had like Evil Geniuses and Alliance and other teams involved, and after a while people complained a lot about it, and there were a lot of like potential, like there was Game of Thrones type political intrigue behind the scenes and fuckery going on with teams that weren't involved, where they essentially pressured Twitch to get rid of these teams because they felt like there could be a conflict of interest there in terms of who got the sponsorships and how tournaments handle these players. And so they were forced to divest themselves of their interest in these teams off to other people, and suddenly other people became the owners magically overnight of these huge esports teams, so that the big company wasn't directly involved in it, who were going to do deals with other teams they didn't own or have any ownership stake in. So I can see an issue right here. Now, I will say, historically, it's just a fact, Chinese esports has been pretty fucking corrupt on many levels. Now, some of that is that their way of doing business and their culture and their ethical and moral values when it comes to doing business is very different. So again, I'm subjectively saying that as a person, I feel it's corrupt. Now, the problem here is there going to be corruption in this aspect? Who knows, right? Who is going to oversee it? Is Blizzard going to oversee it? Is there going to be any sort of inquiries into what's going on, auditing to check it's all above board with the other tournaments? Because even if you're Blizzard, right, you can't just say, right, you take over China and run that. Yeah, you've already given the game to those people. So at that point in time, how does Blizzard oversee the rest of the Chinese scene that isn't this one team in Overwatch League? Because remember, essentially the person they've given to run China and check all that stuff out, the distributor, is the person who owns that team. So that's the conflict of interest, right? Who watches the Watchmen in this scenario? That's kind of a problem, right? Beans. Right. So the other team, and oh, by the way, as I said, huge market in China. That has to be done right because so many million people that you need to watch your game to be as big as a League of Legends or a CSGO have to come from China. If you fuck that up, you're going to have real problems and you're not going to convert in the way that League of Legends has. And by the way, I think League of Legends could have done more, but they fucked up their own league system a long time ago. Right. Then you've got to consider there are 0 LPL or huge Chinese esports teams involved. None of them are the team that's got the Shanghai spot. So think of all the millions of dollars and incredible facilities and the history and the success they've had in Chinese esports and globally. Vici Gaming, oh my god, OMG, Edward Gaming, EDG, Invictus Gaming, IG, WE, formerly known as World Elite, Team WE. None of these are involved. Do they not want to be involved? Do they not want to invest the money? Do they not want to take in the investment and then get involved in it this way? Do they not think it's worth it? What's going on here? China is a massive scene. If you asked me to make a global league, I'd say, right, and we're going to have people from all over the world in it. Oh, yeah, we are. And ideally, if they've got the money, we want them to get involved. We want to make this as big as possible. Oh, yeah, we definitely do. Right, start out with Korea. You want like 4 or 5 franchises, mate. China, better be at least 3 or 4. Europe, yeah, 3 or 4 at least. America, okay, have as many American slots you want. Have 8 if you want, but you've got to have all those other regions represented. No, 1 Chinese slot so far. And Shanghai, in theory, the biggest, the best slot that you could have. Yeah, you could have Beijing as well, but Shanghai, in theory, is the metropolis within China. That's the one that you want if you're in China. That's the LA, that's the New York of China. And it's not even anyone who has a big history in having teams in esports in China. That's a concern for me right now. That's just those other teams aren't interested. They didn't want to have a bidding war and get that slot. Or, hey, if you want to go ahead and go the conspiracy route and go even more corruption, maybe Blizzard just wanted their distributor to be involved. And as long as the money was up, you put the money up, oh, we've got a relationship with you, I'll favor you in this discussion. Hey, listen, I'm not involved with fucking Overwatch League. I can say whatever the fuck I want and speculate all over the place, mate. I haven't got any NDAs or gags that say I have to say anything. That's something I want to know about, right? What's going on there? So, yeah, that's a big concern for me that none of those teams are involved. Because if they are going to get involved now, it's a bit weird, isn't it? They're going to get involved and get a slot, and then what? One of them's going to have Beijing, right? By the way, if there's even 2 slots from China, I'll be amazed. But if they go beyond that, where the fuck else are we going? What? Guangzhou? Bloody hell, where are we going at this point in time, guys? Then you've got to consider, move out of China, we're going to the most important region if you want to have the best players and teams in the world. It's China, it's Korea, right? So in Korea, obviously there's only 1 slot you care about in Korea. Now this is the problem with geolocation is where all the slots going to be. Because if it's going to be by city, 1 person gets Seoul. Guess what? Korean esports is not Korean esports. It's Seoul esports. That's the biggest misnomer in the world. There's no huge Busan esports scene. There's no Suwon fucking esports. It's just Seoul, isn't it? It's one big metropolis with tons of people there, and all the esports teams are there, and all the esports players live there when they're pros, and all the games take place there, and maybe they have a final elsewhere as a road gig type scenario, or to have a different location. It's Seoul. So first of all, how are they going to have more franchises and slots in Korea if that guy gets Seoul? Where are the others going to be based? Because all the fans, all the players are in Seoul. So that's a big concern right there. That suggests to me, by the way, that there might not be many more slots. Maybe there might be 1 other slot. I'd be surprised if there was, but how can there be more than 2 slots? What other cities are we talking about? Sit right now, someone who's never been to Korea, doesn't know much about Korea. Name me 5 Korean cities. You can't do it. You failed already. You didn't even get past 3. I'm surprised if you got past 2. So yeah, well, I actually told you a 3rd one, so I guess fuck you. Now in this scenario, not only is this the most important slot because all the best teams come from there, massive amount of viewership comes from there, the history of esports is there, you want a global aspect, the best players and teams come from there, but let's go beyond that. Look who's gotten the slot in Korea. We've got this guy, Kevin Chu. I had to look him up. I've been involved in esports my entire life. I've followed Overwatch, followed League of Legends, I've followed StarCraft 2, I've followed Quake, followed Warcraft a little bit, I've followed Counter-Strike, obviously going back to all of history, I followed Doom when that was an esport, I followed a lot of esports games, Dota 2, League of Legends. I have never heard of Kevin Chu. I have never heard of KSV Esports that he is the CEO of. I have never heard of Kabam, the mobile gaming development group or whatever the fuck he was involved in before. I don't know who this guy is from Adam. I've never heard of him, but he's gotten arguably the most important slot outside of the USA. He's gotten the best slot you can have in Korea, the best country at producing esports champions and Hall of Fame players. And he is someone I have never heard of. So he's coming in from the outside, and his group, KSV Esports, no one I've ever heard of. So let's have a look, okay? I did a little digging. There's a site called VentureBeat. We all know that one. And it did an article about who this guy is and why he's getting involved in Overwatch League. And this is what it said within that. Choose KSV Esports International Company, one of 7 regional Overwatch League franchises announced by Blizzard today, will be based in both Silicon Valley and Seoul. And it will begin by hiring an all-Korean management team and recruit an all-Korean esports team to compete in the official league of the wildly popular team-based shooter game as fucking players, not esports. Don't misrepresent things, companies writing about this. Said Chu and Wakeford in an interview with GameSpeed. Okay, so at least they're quoting those guys, potentially lying. So, I mean, it is popular, but it's not an esports context, which is pretty key to kind of mention here when you're doing kind of business reporting. So, first and foremost, it's going to be based in both Silicon Valley. Whoa. Where's Silicon Valley in Korea again? Is there a Silicon Valley in Korea? That's like similar to the one in America, isn't it? On the West Coast. Oh, you mean this guy's based in the West Coast in Silicon Valley, but he's bought the fucking franchise slot for Seoul, Korea, and it's going to be based there and Seoul. Oh, okay, and Seoul. So what you mean is you're going to open an office in Seoul. You're going to start making people there. You're going to get the management team and get an all-Korean team to represent Korea, right? At least the second half makes sense. Get a management team who know what they're doing in the scene. Get Korean players, and at least you get some of the Korean fans on your side there, or maybe all of them if you get the only slot. That part makes sense to me. But the fact that someone with no involvement at all, again, that raises alarm bells. Because first of all, who the fuck is this guy? It's not even like he's a famous traditional sports franchise owner and they've told him, listen, a lot of the other people are getting other NA ones, but you know what? How about this one over in Seoul? By the way, they're going to have the best players and you can represent Korea. No, this is a guy, don't know him at all. By the sounds of it, he's an entrepreneur and he's done a lot of things where he's built his fortune. And so he's someone who's not averse to taking risks and to going balls deep on things he thinks that are new and fresh. Okay, that's cool in its own way, but he doesn't even have the traditional sports background. He doesn't have the traditional business background. He comes from a successful business, but one that's based on the internet and boom and bust mentalities and picking something new and pioneering and getting it and then selling it big. What's going on here? He doesn't necessarily have the acumen to be fantastic at running a sports team or an esports team, right? And then who's he partnered with? Well, at the moment, no one. He's made his own esports team, but that's it. He's going to hire all these Korean people. Where's he going to hire them from? Going to hire them from Kesper teams? That's where all the talent is right now. Where's he going to get them from? Who's going to advise him as to who to hire there? I don't know. Also, then you've got to consider, beyond what he's going to do, like I like the part that he's going to hire all Korean team. I think you must do that for the Korean and the Chinese teams, in my opinion. But beyond that, obviously, Seoul is one of the most important regions and locations because it's going to produce the most top talent and the most top teams and has the potential to continue to do the most down the line. As in, after all the Overwatch League teams are set, more world-class players and teams will continue to be produced within Korea that you have to be able to scout and recruit and get onto your team. And if you have the Seoul franchise, you've got a good chance of doing that, right? So that's an extremely important region to own. Well, similarly with the thing about the Chinese region that I said, why is this the guy who's won the bidding to get the Seoul spot? Because the Seoul spot should be very important. Should be lots of Korean esports businesses involved in that and companies that want to buy a slot. None of them won the slot, right? This guy has no connection himself to the Korean scene right now, but we're going to assume by getting the management, he can get the Korean players, all the rest of it. This actually highlights one of the issues to me, which is it wasn't a Kesper team that got them. It wasn't the Korean Esports Association, big teams that have run StarCraft and League of Legends over the last years and haven't gotten into Overwatch League yet, haven't got into OGN Apex, haven't got into Overwatch at all in any context right now. SK Telecom, Samsung, KT Rolster. Some of these, you won't know KT Rolster as much, telecom company in Korea, but you know who the fuck SK Telecom is, right? Because of League of Legends. You definitely know who Samsung is because they probably make your fucking TV or your monitor, right? We all know who the fuck these people are. They are not involved. They're not bidding to get these teams. Or if they are, they're not getting in on the first round. It wasn't that important to them to get the Seoul spot. And the fact that they haven't got the Seoul spot suggests to me they don't want to get involved. And they'd rather stay in Korea and make their own parallel scene, which they might do if Overwatch is even big enough. Or maybe, nightmare scenario, they're not even coming to esports. They're going to stay in League of Legends and other games. And they're not going to get involved in Overwatch. Which means that you won't have as big a Korean scene as you could. You won't access all that extra money and those extra fans and the extra elements of professionalism and history of esports that you can build upon because you won't have them involved. Now, the Korean Seoul spot really highlights to me some of the issues that are going to exist in Overwatch League. And I'll make my own video on this at some point and go really in depth on it. Because if there's only going to be one slot, first of all, that's not enough. Because even if a bunch of the other slots are represented by Korean teams and players, that's not enough to get all the good teams, or to get even vaguely all the elite teams through the door. Even in a world in which half the other slots were all full Korean teams that currently exist, right? That would already mean you'd still get a couple that probably wouldn't make it. You might not get a Kongbu Panthera or an LW Blue picked up. Maybe those guys who don't get picked up, or some of those players get picked up and they recruit replacements in Korea, and they remain the best or some of the best teams in the world, and they aren't even in Overwatch League. So when you say it's the global Overwatch League and it's the best teams in the world, well, it is Blizzard, but it's not all of them, is it? And God forbid that the best actually ends up being a Korean person and a team that's not even in your league, because you couldn't have anticipated it and no one recruited them, or that was the team that didn't get recruited, and 3 months later with a meta switch become the best team in that world. So this is a big problem that the Overwatch League is going to face. Then you got to consider it's actually not that likely that half the teams will be Korean. As I mentioned before with the Noah Whinston example, a lot of the Western slots are going to want to have Western players and Western teams to engage the fans early on and get people involved in that sense. And obviously there's all these teams out there. And again, even just to block other leagues, because if Overwatch League's going on, what do those other guys just sit there doing fuck all? Or do they just play in the contenders or something? Where do those other stars go who aren't going to make it if you hire all the Koreans? Are they going to compete elsewhere? Is that going to get viewership and draw away from Overwatch League? Do they sit on their asses for 6 months or 3 months while it's going on? There's a lot of problems that are potentially here. Then you've got to consider that, will they take whole teams from Korea, who are fantastic right now, or will they break them up? If they break them up, that in itself disperses talent and then leaves some talent here, and then has an issue that then you could have, we brought 2 players from this team and 2 players from this team to these slots, but because the other teams stayed together in Korea, they're better than them. That's interesting in itself. Does that mean the Seoul slot will be better than everyone else? Then you've got to consider that no matter how many teams they take, even if they took 5 whole teams from Korea, there will still be a parallel Korean scene with Apex and other things like that. And not only will they be as good as the Overwatch League, they might be better, but even worse, think about the fans. The fans might prefer their Korean scene. Koreans, people describe it as xenophobia, but that's just one element. That's the negative element of it. It's more like Koreans are heavily invested in nationalism and in their own scene, and they even like games and things made in Korea more than other, if it's vaguely as good. They like to support Korea, and they want Korea to be the best, or they think it's the best. So I could see Korean fans, some of them, not even watching Overwatch League if there's not enough representation, or there's only a couple of teams, if they want to watch Apex, and Apex has as good tournaments, or there are tournaments within Korea, or just check out completely, because the cultural ties will more strongly be to a Korean scene. We haven't seen full globalization from Korean esports. They compete in the World Championship with League of Legends, but they have their own scene, and they've always had their own scenes in StarCraft, in League of Legends, in Overwatch so far as well. So that's a big issue, getting all those Korean fans on board to watch your league in that particular sense. Then, as I said, because there's no Kesper teams, none of that big Korean money is involved in Overwatch League right now. So, Quarter 3 is set to begin. Quarter 3 is beginning, right? This is when Overwatch League's supposed to start. All we've had so far is an announcement of 7 teams. Are there going to be more in China and Korea? No one knows. No one can actually tell you. There's certain factors, as I've pointed out already, speculating and trying to analyse what we've done so far, to suggest in some senses, it's likely there's not that many. Maybe there's going to be some in Europe. Will there be more in China? Yeah, I don't know. And if there is, it's probably not going to be the LPL teams, right? Will there be more in Korea? Impossible, but where is it going to be based? And it doesn't sound like it's going to be the Kesper teams. Then you got all the rumours of the problems, as I've said, of people who maybe were going to be involved, who then looked into the numbers and really did research, and now they want to get out, as you saw in Richard's piece, which I'll link below. So there's a lot of questions that have to be answered about the Overwatch League. This didn't answer a lot of them. It actually hinted at more questions that we didn't even think of or know about before. And to me, while everyone's focusing on how great it is that the USA has got it and got people like the Kraft guy involved and gotten people from traditional esports even involved, that's all great. But I'm really concerned about this Korean and this Asian issue, because I feel like that could be the blind spot, the blind side that chops away at Overwatch League at the legs by not having the Chinese viewers and the Korean viewers, and then not having the best teams and players fully represented from there, because you go the WWE route and you don't necessarily have the best wrestler win the belt, you have the most popular wrestler win the belt. I'm not saying they're going to rig the league. I mean that people would prefer to have someone who's good but also marketable over someone who's the best but not marketable as much and doesn't relate to your geolocation, since they're emphasizing that route. And remember, that's the thread tying through all of this. They're not even going a traditional esports route. They're going heavily into this idea that it's your city, it's your team, it's your players, it's the Overwatch League. If you're from Miami, there's your team, Miami, Orlando. That's a very big gamble. They might think it's the future, but there's no proof that that's going to work yet. So there's a lot of questions still to be answered regarding the Overwatch League.
Hey guys, it's Dreamforce here. You know they say that every time you pick Hanzo in ranked, God kills a Kirin? Well, this is Thorin's channel. And every time you pick Hanzo in ranked, Thorin kills a Seagull.